When my mother gave birth to me, the baby is always picked up, isn't it? So we identify the babies depending on what the genitalia they have.
Identity development is not a linear process, and different people experience different developmental issues about their gender identity.
There's a lot to do with transgender people more than just dressing queer.
The problem with the gender binary is that it reinforces these stereotypes about men and women, and in the process, it excludes those of us who do not fit neatly into the stereotype.
I just didn't feel I was in the right body.
Someone outrightly just said, for trans people, it is a choice. For intersex, they're born this
born like that.
And we were asking ourselves, like, okay, so who will choose problems? Who will choose
dysphoria?
Yeah, who will even choose to waste their money on hormones and surgeries?
Nililelewa kama mtoto wa kike, lakini vile naendelea kukua, hapa hakuna uke.
ITGNC is an acronym that stands for intersex, transgender, and gender non-conforming persons.
For a very, very long time in Kenya, conversations around gender identity are very binary. We have been raised, we have been socialized to understand that gender simply needs to conform to a particular a societal construction that becomes like a schema that people need to adhere to. And if you tend to deviate from the norm, then that becomes absolutely a problem.
ITGNC identity is not understood by most people in Kenya because we only represent less than 1% of the actual population. There is limitation from the word go.
One time, there was a whole issue about a surgery that had been performed in Kenyatta by a urologist doctor. And it had been a transgender woman. And that was the first time I heard a word that would connect to what I was feeling.
Shikamo mama.
Shikamo mwanangu, wapi basi?
Nitarudi nyumbani ile siku utanikubali mimi kama mtoto wako wa kike. Lakini mama, sijihisi kama mtoto wa kiume. So nikubali tu mimi mwanao kama mtoto wa kike mama.
Aya, wewe kama unarudi nyumbani kama mtoto wa kiume. Kama wewe ni kike basi achana na mimi kabisa.
If you had to live your life either as an intersex person, a transgender person, a gender non-conforming person, you probably have to move from where you were born and raised and go miles to a far-off place where you'd have to begin literally a new life.
Kuhisi kwa mimi ni msichana nikiwa katika umri wa miaka 4 ndio nilianza kusikia kuwa hisia zangu na maumbile yangu hayaendani kuwa mimi ni mtoto wa kiume, bali akili na kila kitu kilikuwa kinanituma mimi ni mtoto wa kike. Mpaka vitendo, mpaka kila kitu nilichokuwa nafanya ilikuwa ni kama mtoto wa kike.
Transgender persons are persons whose gender identity does not match their birth sex.
I realized myself when I was young. Because I liked to play with girls, I used to tell my mother to go and buy me dolls, to go and buy me dresses, to go and buy me makeup. So it started long ago.
As early as in primary school, that's when I knew I was not like the other children.
I started feeling awkward when I was in class 6, 7, going up to 8. Because that's the time when people have adolescence. When people have deeper voices, people acting in different ways, people having beards and everything, and you're like, yo, what's happening to me? Like, there's nothing happening. My family didn't accept me, and they didn't play a role of backing me up in society. Because as an African, you're supposed to follow the culture norms,
the religion, and also the society norm.
It reaches up to a point, like I used to go with my mom somewhere, even if it's just a function, and everybody's like, you have a nice daughter. And I'm like, why don't people see me like the son my mom gave birth to?
Most people usually think coming out is just coming out to the general public, but you have to also come out to yourself, to accept yourself, to understand how you flow and all that.
So I came out to my parents when I was 16 years old, and of course the reaction wasn't pleasant. Especially my firstborn sister was a gaslighter to the issue, because she was gaslighting my parents about it's all these things I'm watching on TV. Maybe I'm getting all this influence from the TV and internet. So it led to a lot of physical violence from my parents.
We also notice there's a lot of violence that also happens in schools. The soggiest violence that's happening in schools, and schools are hotbeds of terror in terms of, trans people being harassed, being beaten. They're harassed by students. They're harassed by both students and teachers. And the majority of trans people are also expelled out of school, and they're not able to complete their education.
Very many people in this community, very many ITGNC persons, do not reach the 8th grade or standard 8, as we say. Fewer still reach the 4th form. Almost none, or close to none, go to tertiary level education. Why? Because of stigma, discrimination, lack of agency, lack of resources.
I went to an all-girls high school, and while I was there, I was actually in 4 different high schools in the 4 years. And I was expelled in a couple, 1, and I was suspended in the others several times over allegations of lesbianism. However, in the school that I was expelled in, I remember stating very clearly, I'm not a lesbian. And someone had outed me and said, I had said that I have never had feelings for men, and that myself I feel like a man.
Nilipoenda kidato cha kwanza, wanafunzi walikuwa wako like, huyu ni mwanamke, huyu ni mwanaume. Ilifika mahali mpaka wanafunzi wakataka kuniua, sijui wakanipangia njama. Wazazi walikuwa wanafanya maandamano, demonstration.
The deputy head girl, she asked me to sing for her. She kissed me inappropriately and then said that I was coming on to her. And at that point, I was really struggling. I didn't really want anything to do with that. I didn't want to love girls. I didn't want to be me. I wanted to be away from the entire thing.
Mwalimu mkuu akaita mkutano wa wanafunzi, wa walimu, kusema mimi ni hunta. Sasa ndo kidogo wanafunzi wakaona ile roho ya huruma, sababu society yetu ina huruma. Hatuwezi sema wote, lakini baadhi kubwa wako na huruma ya mtu mwenye jinsia mbili kuliko yule mwenye mvuka jinsia.
The society in general is more accepting of intersex people because it's based on biological facts. I put it in air quotes because also being transgender is based on biological facts, And they say that makes more sense than being trans.
For intersex people, it's a little bit different because intersex people are people who are actually struggling with issues of bodily anatomy, and which is not the same for trans people. And there has to be that clear distinction between how intersex people view their issues and how trans people issues, and not trying to, mix the two particular issues within that particular context. Because, trans people are trans people are people who are struggling with, gender identity and trying to find a true, authentic self. And intersex people are actually on the extreme end are people actually having the bodily anatomy that actually presents differently from actually what presents with everyone.
Interpretation yao ni wakati tunasema an intersex person, it's not clearly either a man or a woman. So anaonanga ni kama sex organs, kuna moja hapa ingine hapa, ama kuna ingine hapa juu ingine chini. So unapata kuna misinformation kwa community.
Formerly, you'd find an intersex kid is born, then through collaboration of the parents and medics or doctors, they'd have what they call corrective surgeries, right? To try and get rid of one organ or the other, which basically tends to be a form of genital mutilation.
In worst cases, we've even seen incidences of forced sterilization that's happened also amongst intersex children, including even denying intersex children, life-saving treatments like, puberty blockers.
Even a parent has no right to do that to their children. The child should first reach an age of reason. And if they deem it is necessary to have that surgery, so-called corrective surgery, then they can do it.
Naitwa Kwamboka. Na Kwamboka kwa Kikisii ni jina inamaanisha mwanamke. Nilifanyiwa surgery, ndio maana nikapatiwa jina Kwamboka. So hiyo jina Kwamboka nimekuwa nikiitumia kwa maisha yangu yote. Kuna vile unaweza tusiwa shule na ma cousins na community. Kumbuka ukizaliwa mtaani huko ushago, kuna ule mama alizaa mtoto nani. So because of that, unapata kuna ile matusi kidogo inakuja, but uelewi hii matusi inamaanisha nini. Mpaka wakati nimemaliza form 4. Then sasa unajua umemaliza form 4, you are 17, 18 years, uko 19. So unapata Kwamboka and the actual person is not Kwamboka. Kwa nini natumia hiyo jina mpaka saa hii? Naitumia so that community ipate ku understand. The larger society ipate ku understand. Not necessarily ukiona jina Kwamboka ama Makena ama Wanjiro ama Akechi, hiyo inakuonyesha tu mwanamke. Lazima tu understand kuwa apart from a man and a woman, pia there is an intersex person.
Probably would begin with violence that is perpetrated against them. Oftentimes, this will begin from their families at a young age, uncles, aunties, even parents.
You see, when you go to malls and you have to be checked, I would go to the guy's side because I present masculine, yeah? But those guys would refuse to check me. And also the women, like they both refuse to check me. And I can't enter the mall, and I'm with my family. And it's really embarrassing, really traumatizing because it now creates a whole scene,
It's painful seeing my peers who are ITGNC persons go through such a horrific moment and time in their life. Like the last thing you'll want is to offend someone publicly just because of who you identify yourself as. So I think it's about time that as much as we keep moving forward with the movement, it's also very, very important to actually educate the public and society at large, just to empower them with knowledge, because knowledge is power at the end of the day, And in this age and era, you can't really say you don't know who maybe, let's say, a gay person is. That would be like complete dishonesty, Because the same way there's gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersex, there's transgender, So I think at the end of it all, we are still human beings.
Nililelewa kama mtu wa msichana. So hata nikienda shule nilikuwa navaa dress. Wakati nifika 7, 8 hapo nikaanza kujisiai. Hatupelekani na hizi vitu zingine. So wakati nilikuwa najaribu kuuliza wazazi, what is not happening? So wao walikuwa tu wakali kwangu, wananipiga nini.
Kitu ya kwanza community na understand kuwa an intersex person is a curse. Na ni kwa sababu ni laana. So huyu mtoto hata community sana wanaua. Na kama mama atakwamilia sema hapana, huyu ni mtoto wangu, atafichwa kabisa. Na baada ya kufichwa, kumbuka huyu mtoto hata kama msasi atamficha for how long, at the end of the day atatokelezea nje kama mtu amekuwa mtu mkubwa. Lakini unapata bado society inaendelea kumfuata na kuendelea kumdiscriminate side.
The hardest thing I think ITGNC persons go through is basically just living another day, because society, or a good chunk of society, is against them.
When I came back to Kenya, I had transitioned to a trans woman. But when I reached home, I was forced to detransition by my family due to the fact that they did not want shame or stigma from the other neighbors, like, what's wrong with your child? And at that point, I kind of understood because it was new for them, so to say, because they had never seen me fully transitioned. At that time, I just did it because I didn't have a place to go. And these are the form of things that most transgender people face.
I took one whole year of trying to understand myself, try to understand what it means to be transgender. I took a really good amount of time. And on October 21st, 11th, I don't remember, but it's National Coming Out Day, and I figured I should tell my mom. So I told my mom the whole story, and it was really funny because she was like, so you're like Caitlyn Jenner? And that was the only way she could relate it. And her answer to everything was, okay, you can do all those things, but just not in my house.
Wakati mazaid, ikawa sasa, like, hiyo challenge imekuwa kubwa sana kwa nikaanza kuwa so ikakuwa ni issue kwa kijiji. So the neighbors ndio waleta hiyo issue, so wazazi wakaona ni aibu. So kuona ni aibu wakaona badala wao wakae na aibu, ni heri aibu iwaondokee. Being disowned by parents,
that's like the most hurting thing that could ever happen to someone. Like just being rejected by your own family because of who you are and who you identify as.
So when you look at what most Kenyans understand by the term agency and how they would react, it's the various contextual analysis that we have to bring in. We have to bring in issues of where you're from. We have to bring in issues of culture. You have to bring in issue of diversity. We have to bring in issues of education, exposure, and all these things. So we are looking at people who are not exposed to any information, and so we are basing that with a particular reaction to what the term agency means. And so when you look at that analysis, then we can already preempt what that's going to be.
My mom was kind of supportive, but my dad was reluctant about it. So it reached to a point we had verbal exchange of words between me and my dad. It reached a point where I got pissed off and like broke the windows from his car and he took me to the police station.
A lot of times it is said these people bring bad energy. They're a bad omen, you know. They're taboo because of societies and cultural norms and social mores and all that.
One usipopendwa na society, hiyo ikuonesha discrimination, ikuonesha stigma, utapata utaendelea kujichukia, so hata inakuwa ni ngumu sana wewe kupenda mtu hata kama atakuwa amekupenda.
It's important for people to educate themselves that trans peoples are human beings and they have their respect and dignity.
There's name calling, there's cat calling, there's places you can't go because you don't feel safe. You just feel insecure because you just think like whatever happened last time will happen this time. And it goes a long way. And if you don't check it on time, it goes to depression.
Nimekuwa na mental health issues. Zilianza wakati nilikuwa discriminated from the family. Ilianza hivyo, so I had nowhere to go. I was just away from home. Then sikuwa nimejua mtu yote, pia mimi mwenyewe sikuwa najielewa mimi ni mtu aina gani. So it was a journey. Nilikuwa kwa street for around 3 years hapa Nairobi, Sachokora, which was not easy for me. So ni mzigo nilikuwa nimebeba.
We have a very bad background. I mean, mental health in Kenya already is a problem. Less than 500 psychologists, less than 100 psychiatrists. And so can you imagine bringing in agency community within a situation where there's a huge problem? So then it becomes an even bigger problem.
Like just being gay in the community is a problem. So you can now imagine adding up being transgender. People are like, what the hell is going on with you? You know? So it kind of gets to you and it eats you, especially if you don't have a psychosocial support system that actually like grounds you and actually helps you go through the process.
In the African context, once you ask for help, you're deemed weak or you're supposed to suck it up, you know, man up and all that. But no, some things really you just can't do them by yourselves. And it's okay not to be okay.
But again, the law is also very, very silent. So there's no clear anti-discrimination policies that are actually there in place to address some of these particular issues. And that's why it's particularly important when the law speaks explicitly to some of the issues that address anti-discrimination that happens in the everyday lives of transgender people. Extreme forms of violence happening in public hospitals, in the judiciary, in the criminal justice system, in the education system, and that just speaks to the level of injustices that are happening in all these particular places that are actually not being spotlighted.
Once an ITGNC person is arrested for whatever reason and taken into custody, first there is the issue of if it's a trans person, but also an intersex person, will this person be taken to the male cells or female cells? Right? Depending on your presentation and on the arresting officer's mood, they'll decide to take you wherever, but most probably they'll take you to the cell that corresponds to the sex or gender marker that is written on your identity document.
The Constitution allows us to have a name change. The problem was with the registrar's office, the Registrar of Persons office, because they're the ones who refused to issue us with an ID until we had to go to court for them to issue us with an ID.
The first case was in 2013, where they allowed a transgender woman to amend her Kenya National Examination Council certificate with the names that they had legally changed to.
Yes, kuja na documents yenye inaonyesha Francisca Kwamboka Kibagendi, then wewe unaona Francis. So tunataka at least hizo documents ziambatane na sisi wenyewe.
For you to change your name, you need about 5 documents. Initially, when I did my name change, they wanted 4. By then, it was just your ID, your birth certificate, your ID printout.
Ndio upadirisha ID yako as an intersex person. Cost ni 100,000. So mzazi ataacha kununulia watoto wake chakula, aache kulipa rents, aache kufanya hata shughuli zingine, akupeleka kubadilisha ID yako.
Not many Kenyans have seen a passport, so not many Kenyans are traveling. So you will find out they say, no, I don't think we can work with this, but we want your ID.
Then pia ni security. Unapata nimeitisha Uber ya kunipeleka mahali. So mtu atasema, si niliona jina Kwamboka, so nilikuwa na expect mwanamke. So akikuona anasema mpaka unapata saa zingine tunakuwa hash kidogo.
There's something called voluntary assumption of risk, where you intentionally put yourself in harm's way. We can protect our security by avoiding that, e.g. avoiding situations that would put us in a situation where we cannot maybe protect ourselves because of our expression or identity.
Sonia, I could like to ask you a question. Your gender and confirming, are you bipolar?
She called me bipolar, and it's just funny how people struggle to understand non-binary people. Non-binary is a term that refers to people who do not fall under the gender binary of man and woman, in that they do not identify exclusively as either man or woman. So non-binary is used by some people as a personal identity, but it can also be used as an umbrella term to include any other gender that does not fall exclusively into this.
I relate with non-binary people as I would any other human being. It rarely crosses my mind that non-binary people are not human beings or there's anything more to them other than just the ordinary. They're human, they exist, they express however they feel comfortable, and for me, that's an okay thing.
So when you look at some of the historical stories we hear from our great-great-grandmothers and what cultures have for different populations, I mean, it's very much cultural. And so there's a very rich culture in our identities. We just have to unpack that.
Because I am non-binary, I feel free to be anything. Like I could wear anything, and I feel that affirms me. And I feel I'm not so tied to gender roles because in my head they do not exist.
Because for a long time we have been raised to understand that development is a very linear process, that, you know, when someone grows up, they are at a particular stage or at a particular point in time, they have to conform to specific societal dictums, that when one does not fit into that particular context, then you're actually considered to be deviant, or you are considered to be out of the norm.
They, them is a gender-neutral pronoun in English. And for a lot of people who do not identify with either man or woman or with the gender binary as a whole, that neutrality is comfortable for them. However, not all non-binary people use they, them pronouns. There are languages where they already have gender-neutral pronouns.
There's no she, her in Swahili. So if you stop and think about it, what word do we have for her? And what's the word do we have for him? So we never really had those conversations when we are growing up with our cultures. These cultures just came to us. We just embraced ourselves and we just lived as our authentic selves.
Gender and sex always have very distinct characteristics, and more often than not, people always see the sex parts of it and not really the gender identity bit of it. And that means people rarely ever get to ask, okay, someone looks like this, like that. But they always want to deduce you to what are your genitals, like what do you have, and they that classify you as a man or a woman.
The laws in Kenya are not clearly stipulated in the sense that there isn't like a clear definition of ITGNC persons, let alone having kids or the adoption process.
And the fact that we are actually Kenyans, and this means that we need to have conversations around having equal rights as any other Kenyan.
People adopt kids, like Chinyamaji, so to speak, because now when I go, I'll definitely go, maybe if I haven't fully transitioned, I'll probably just go as a man, you know, and take that baby under my wing, you know. So like whatever happens back door doesn't really matter.
We have people with long hair, we have people with short hair. We don't try to explain that to everyone. We have people who write with the right hand. We have people who use the left hand. We can spend so much time trying to find out why person A uses the left hand and why person B uses the right hand.
Community wamekuona kuomboka, which means at a certain point walikuona na skirt. So utawaambia aje sasa, wewe si kuomboka ama wewe si Francisca, wewe ni Francis.
Ule mtu yote mwenye atanisupport, mwenye ananielewa, nitaenda na yeye. Mwenye anisupport, nitaachana naye.
The moment you take care of yourself, both mentally, physically, you know, the whole bit, you're set, you're ready to go, and you're ready to like handle situations that involve the movement.
I'm at a point in life where it's important to tell people that you need to love yourself first and give yourself always big up yourself.
Lakini mimi nitawaambia leo, I'm an intersex person and I'm proud. Sababu hata very soon I'm getting married. Na hata sitambui itakuwa kwa wedding show na sialiki mtu.
To be in a relationship, you have to be comfortable in your body to be able to share it with someone else. So if you're not comfortable in your own body, then how would you share it with someone else? So for me, I am not in any relationship.
I'm a married man. Niko na mwanamke wangu na watoto wake wawili.
I don't have a sex life. Wewe nimekuona sana wewe.
I'm in several entanglements. I'm in several situationships.
I feel like Della. I'm always Della. And this other person is not me. Yeah, there are people who accept me for who I am, and there are people who don't.
We are not just fighting because we are ITGNC persons. We are fighting because we are human beings, because we are citizens of Kenya that need to be looked at, protected. Being an ITGNC is something that is keen, dear.
Always look to the mirror and tell yourself, you know, I'm a queen. Christina. Okay, my time is up.
Oh.
See ya.
Yeah. We ain't nothing new, and this ain't nothing new. We've been here on my mama's land, 10 toes down. Been surviving only by the sound of the voice from the Most High. No lie, feet don't fail us now.